Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jerry, and today I got my Week 5 power rankings, going over every team where I rank them, who moves up, who moves down, and hopefully giving you some good content on what's going on in the NFL this week and what we can look for moving forward. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get right into this, starting off with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Moved them back to the back of the list last week, and they stay there. They stay put at 32. Another loss is actually a game probably should have won against the Texans, but they moved 0-4, only 0-4 team in the league. And until they put together a win, they're going to have a really hard time moving out of that 32 spot. Next, we have the New England Patriots at moving back to, second worst team to 31, mainly just looking kind of dysfunctional on offense, still having a lot of issues with fumbling. Really just turning the ball over in general. Jacoby Brissett really hasn't been looking very good. Ramondre Stevenson next to me here. Fumbled every game so far this season. So another loss and a bad one this week. So I thought this game was oddly close, even though it was a 17-point game against the 49ers. But I just thought it was closer than what it should have been for this Patriots defense. Actually did too bad. They could have done better against the run in this game. Probably missing Matthew Judon in this particular game. But yeah, when the defense able to slow down the pass, I guess at the very least, but still couldn't stop the run. Couldn't really get anything going on offense. Starting to hear the media call Drake May's name. They move back to the second to last spot, right behind the Miami Dolphins, who. It's really not fair to them to be this far back. I think losing Tua has been a massive issue for the team, and it really shows probably how good Tua is, or at least how well he fits in the offense, because I still don't believe that he's like this great, phenomenal, top 3-5 quarterback. I think he just fits the offense really well and does what they need him to do really well. So I think that's why it works so well for the team, and why they're doing so poorly now. You get Snoop Huntley come in, and A-Chain wasn't really able to do anything this game. They start giving Jalen Wright more touches, and it was just kind of dysfunctional, to tell you the truth, on offense. And honestly, their defense really hasn't been great, which their defense has been put in a really shit situation because nobody was expecting the Dolphins to be a top-tier defense to begin with. But then you add in the offense playing so poorly, and the defense has to be on the field longer, gets tired. And so they move back to 30, another big drop. And I really think their only hope at moving up at this point is getting the offense rolling, whether it be with, Tua staying healthy and getting back on the field, or Snoop Huntley more understanding the offense. So Dolphins are at 30. Browns kind of forgot to move them back last week. They should have moved back. They only lose by a little bit to the Raiders here. So probably a bit of a harsh 7 drop back for them. These are the two of the biggest movers of the week. We got a couple more that move 7, I think, or maybe just one more. But yeah, 1-3, lose to the Raiders, who haven't really thought have been a great team. Obviously, they don't even have their best player in Devontae Adams last week, and it's just been a tough season for the Browns. So they move back 7 for me. Really going to need Deshaun Watson to start playing better football, because last year with Joe Flacco, the Browns still looked really good. And then this year you have Deshaun Watson in, and it really just doesn't even look like, it's a borderline NFL offense. It's just not clicking very well, and Deshaun Watson's going to need to get his shit together on the field and off the field. Next, we have Tennessee Titans at 28, moving up 3 spots. They get their first win again over the Dolphins. So I don't think it's that impressive. They also do it with Mason Rudolph, with Will Levis just being a football player like he is. Makes this immaculate dive to get the first down, and then messes up his throwing shoulder, which just seems like something that if you told me before the season, Will Levis puts his heart on the field to make a play and injures himself, specifically his throwing shoulder, which I think is hilarious. Not hilarious that he injured it, but just ironic, more or less. And then, Mason Rudolph comes onto the field, doesn't really do anything spectacular, just runs the offense probably more of how it should, because Will Levis is a bit of a ticking time bomb there, and the bomb goes off in this game, but Rudolph is able to lead the rest of the reindeer to a W here at 28. Again, 3 spots, nothing crazy, just first win out of that completely defeated column, so they move up a little bit here for me. Next, Raiders, who we just talked about, who beat the Browns, who again don't think are a very good team. Raiders haven't looked like a very good team, although they have a win against the Ravens, which is something it's very interesting to think about that was even possible. But they get the win here without Davante Adams. Obviously, the trades, just talked about that a little bit. But I thought the Raiders were going to be a better football team. I was pretty high on Zamir White, and Alexander Madison's already looked better this year. You think I'm a fan of Gardner Minshew. He doesn't play very well in this game, but they ended up getting the W. I don't think that the Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, I think a lot of people, specifically myself, were thinking, wow, this is going to be great for the team. This is going to be huge. They're going to get all this pressure. And I think it's kind of been underwhelming. I don't think they've been bad, but it's just been underwhelming for me. So Raiders move up one spot in just a measly little win over the Browns there. And then we have a few teams that kind of just move up because other teams moved back. I think the Giants actually have gotten better as the season went on, and I think they actually win this game against the Cowboys if they're able to get the run game going, because Micah Parsons and Tank Lawrence come out for the Cowboys, and then you end up big opportunity to have some big run game from Devin Singletary. And I'm not saying Devin Singletary is this premier back that needs to do better, but he had been kind of a decent portion of that offense early on, whether it be in the receiving game or the running game, and was really phased out of this game. I think he had like 11 carries for 24 yards, and with the Cowboys shutting him down, I think it's the reason they lose. Obviously, Wan'Dale Robinson and steps up, and then Malik Neighbors keeps doing what he's doing. Daniel Jones, finding a way to get them the ball. So it's kind of working out there in the pass game. To get the run game going, I think they win. Also could have been a little better on defense because the Cowboys offense really has just been Jake Ferguson and CeeDee Lamb. So Giants move up a spot, though, in a loss. Again, more just because other bad teams move back. Similar with the Panthers. Panthers moving up 5 spots, certainly something. Played a really good close game against the Bengals, and I think the Bengals were due for one, and I think the Bengals are actually a better team than their record shows. So that's why I do have the Panthers moving up a little bit more here. I think the Bengals, they always start off tough. So obviously an optimal get-right game is going to be against the Panthers. Panthers looked better last week, not like the prior week, week 3, with Andy Dalton. And they still looked better today, this current game, you know what I mean. Chuba Hubbard has a great game. Deontay Johnson's getting more involved, Xavier Legette. So a lot of positives there for the Panthers, and that's why they move up so much. Again, just other teams kind of looking like the more dysfunctional ones that move back, i.e. the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Titans. So I think because of that, the Panthers move up 5 whole spots here. Starting to put it together on offense, just need to figure out that defense. But they are 1-3 and still not a great team in this league. And we'll have to see what happens with Bryce Young. But they're right behind the Bengals, who get a win over the Panthers. So naturally, with how close they were in the rankings, made sense to have them above. I think we're going to need to see a game like this from the Bengals on a more consistent basis and against maybe a better team at least once to consistently move up. I mean, obviously, if they win, they'll likely move up. But I think to get into this like playoff realm that we expect the Bengals could be in, they're going to have to beat some good teams. And, it really matters about when you get to the playoffs, who gets hot at the right time. So if the Bengals can put together, either get it together soon now or, second half of the season, I think they could be a playoff team again. And then always, with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase Brown has a great game this week. I think a great backfield of Chase Brown and Zach Moss there. I think you could be looking at a team. We'll have to see, though. We got to see. They got to get better. So they're at 24, right behind the Rams, who are at 23, move back 2 spots. Lost to the Bears. Lost to a lot of their players, too, due to injuries, unfortunately. The 2 next to me here, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, definitely going to miss some time. So very unfortunate for them. And for Matt Stafford, at the end of his career, would love to be a contender at this point. Obviously, already has a ring on his finger, a couple of them. Well, I guess he's married, too. But, he's got the Super Bowl ring. And wants to get another one. He's got Sean McVay. You obviously lose Aaron Donald, and that's showing to be a problem in this game where DeAndre Swift finally has his breakout game for Chicago. Rams weren't really able to stop the run, and they weren't able to get enough pressure to harm Caleb Williams enough. And when he's under pressure, he can struggle. This week under pressure, he does very well, and mainly just dumps the ball off to DeAndre Swift. Rams couldn't figure out a way to stop it, so they moved back a couple spots. They're going to have to figure it out, and it's going to be a tough one for Sean McVay with all the injuries, especially on their offense there. Next, we have the Denver Broncos, who, get a barely win over the Jets. You win by 1 point, 10-9, pretty ugly game. Bo Nix throws for 60 yards, 12 for 25. It was not great, but at the end of the day, the Broncos are 2-2. This is, one of the worst 2-2 teams on the list. Obviously, we had the Raiders at 27, and then the Bears right behind them. The Bears Bears are coming up. We'll get to the Bears, but Denver Broncos, I guess, would be the second 2-2 team then. Broncos move up 2 spots. Again, they just got to win over the Jets. It was still a very ugly game, so I don't think they deserve to move up very much, but I still have them ahead of the Rams. I think I'm just kind of underrating the Rams just because of how many injury problems they're dealing with. Broncos did have a very good game against the Buccaneers, who I thought were good the previous week. So they're at 22, moving up 2 spots at 2-2. Lots of 2s. Arizona Cardinals at 21. They moved back 4 spots. Kind of overreacted a little bit last week to their win over the Rams. They get a monster win over the Rams, but I think this week kind of showed their true colors. And the Cardinals that actually looked pretty good, stayed in some close games against some good teams. And then, you beat the Rams, which I don't think the Rams are a great team anyway, but you end up getting a horrible loss here. And you're just going to move back a decent amount in a big loss in a game that you probably should have at least been in. So the Cardinals move back 4 spots at 1-3 to 21. Chicago Bears, one of the biggest movers up this week. Not the biggest, we'll get to them later, but I have them move up 6. I think I was just kind of underrated on them. I try not to pay attention to other power rankings, but you scroll through social media and you see some of them pop up and you go, oh, what do people think here? And I hadn't really seen any had the Bears lower than 19. So I guess I'll be that one. Being a Bears fan, I'll have them just, the Bears just, as a Bears fan, they always stink. I just assume that they always stink. So we're going to keep them low until they, Caleb Williams is going to have a great day offensively. Offense is going to have to be clicking in the run game, pass game, preferably not just passing to DeAndre Swift. Get 7 receptions in this game. And then the next most was 3 with, I think it was Keenan and DJ both had 3 as well in this game. So, Bears move up 6, pretty big mover, but still only at 20 at 2-2, which I think the other reason that I feel they deserve to, that I would consider why they should move up a lot is because you look at some of these teams, and like I talked about the Panthers before, how, they were pretty much at the back of the list, and it was just because they were dysfunctional all around. Well, now they've figured out the offense, and they kind of have a solid offense. He scored 24 points to where you can make that work. Now you got to figure out the defense. The Bears, where they've had a bad offense all year, but their defense has been as good as we thought it was at the end of the year last year. Definitely top 10 as far as the defense goes. And then as far as the offense, you're starting to see things come together in this game where, although the stats aren't great from Caleb Williams specifically, the offense as a whole, able to put together a good offense to get this win. Offense is actually putting up points. You see almost 400 total yards from Caleb Williams last week in a loss. So you're starting to see pieces of the offense come together while the defense plays better. And I think that kind of moves them up closer to this middle tier where you get into those teams where they don't really have one big negative, like the Rams just a couple slides ago, having trouble on defense. Cardinals having trouble on defense. So stuff like that. But I got the Bears at 20 here, moving up 6 spots from last week. Right behind the Colts, which I think is fitting. They just lost last week. Colts definitely deserve to move up. They beat the Steelers, barely beat the Steelers. Justin Fields probably should have came back there. Unfortunately, gets a early snap from the center, some sort of miscommunication. Fun thing here, point differential 0, so completely even on the year. But the thing is, I think the reason they don't move up as much is because it sounds like Anthony Richardson's going to come back soon, and I think they'd be better off with Joe Flacco. And if you look at the yards per game, that stat is mainly because of Anthony Richardson. That's why I've got him pointing to it there, because they're just not really doing great on offense. I would probably guess that, because he had a couple games, like he had one game, he had like, I think it was just over 200 passing yards, but he had two passes that were like 50 plus yards. I think one was Alec Pierce, one was Josh Downs, or they were right around like 45 and 55 or something. So that was like a third of their offensive yards was just on those two plays. And it's really seemed like even with some of those big plays, that's really been the only way they've been getting into the end zone until Joe Flacco comes in. And, obviously I'll very easily remember the drive against the Bears where Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor basically just pound the rock down the field the whole time and make the Bears look silly. I think they need to do that more often with Anthony Richardson. Unfortunately, when they do that, it results in injury. So I like how the offense looks under Joe Flacco, but I'm not going to overreact to Joe Flacco being in there. But at the 2-2, Colts move up to 19. Next, we have the New York Jets, who bad loss, but they're still 2-2. I say bad loss. It was only 1 point, but it was just how they played. The focal point of the team and the best part of the team should be Aaron Rodgers and how he's operating the offense. And I wouldn't necessarily put it on Aaron Rodgers because his offensive line looked like a sieve. It was just letting people through all game. He gets pressured 18 times, 10 offensive penalties, whether it be on, holding, false starts, just stupid shit that shouldn't happen in an Aaron Rodgers led offense. Everybody's going, oh, should they change the snap count and should they change the cadence and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's one of Aaron Rodgers' main things he does. He has the most touchdowns in NFL history off of penalties. So he kind of makes his money off of gaining on these big plays and really struggled for him. So I don't think really Aaron Rodgers' fault here. It's just a lot of struggles from the offense. You have Garrett Wilson fumble, Breece Hall. Where was he? He didn't even do anything. So then Braylon Allen's honestly looked like the better runner so far this year, which is what they bring him in to do, of course. But I think you need to get Breece Hall involved. Probably, I know he had a horrible game, but in other ways, there's got to be some way because clearly they had his number. And Jets, pretty bad loss to Broncos there. I don't think the Broncos are great. 10-9 game, and the Jets move back 5 spots for me. Going to have to figure out how to put it together as a whole. Obviously, defense does pretty good if you only allow 10 points, but the offense needs to put up more than 9, needs to find the end zone. So the Jets move back 5 spots for me to 18. Really thought after those 2 wins that they might, it was like, oh, the Jets may be this playoff team. So that's why I had them up at 13, but really didn't look good this week. So they move back right behind the Chargers, who move back 2 spots. A little bit of overreacting to them early too, starting off 2-0. They have back-to-back losses this week. This week, obviously, to the Chiefs. But the Chiefs were basically able to shut down their run game, which has been their bread and butter, which kind of ironic with Justin Herbert, with how good he was throwing the first few years. Obviously, we anticipated with Jim Harbaugh operating a run-heavy offense that this would kind of happen. And Justin Herbert, you got to utilize his talent. But I think, honestly, it could be utilizing it in a better way because you're taking some pressure off of Justin Herbert because he had always been asked to do a lot. But when the run game's shut down, he's going to have to be that like special Justin Herbert that could throw for 400 yards. And in this game, he is not that. And they end up getting the loss to the Chiefs. Despite Rashee Rice comes out, weren't really able to cover Travis Kelce properly, which is super ironic. Obviously, there's all the news about Derwin James conveniently getting suspended for a game. Derwin James, also the guy that, did the wrestling slam to Travis Kelce last year. And then, of course, Travis Kelce goes off in this game. So tough one for the Chargers, but they move back 2 spots, two straight losses, and looking tougher for them. They're going to have to get that run game going again, I think, in that Jim Harbaugh-led offense. So they move back to 17. Dallas Cowboys move up 3 spots. Just a measly little win over the Giants, who again aren't ranked very high for me. And then this again, a game again where the Giants probably could have won. I don't think they move up as much because of how bad of a team it is. Again, that's almost one where they're kind of just moving up more because the other teams moved back. I thought the Cowboys looked better than the Jets this week. And, their view to me as a whole looked better. So that's why I have them moving back 3 spots to 16. Offense, really, I said it earlier, just seems to be CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. They got to figure out the running game there. Rico Dowdle's okay, but he's just not what Ezekiel Elliott was years ago and what Tony Pollard was there. In my opinion, we'll see if he can get better over time. And then next we have the Atlanta Falcons getting a big win over the Saints, who Saints look really strong early on. And honestly, the Falcons didn't really play this one like they wanted to win, in my opinion. It was just Younghoe Koo. It just has a phenomenal kick to end the game. You have a big Troy Anderson pick six. I think the offense definitely needs to be better. Bijan, he really needs to stay involved a lot. And I actually really like Kirk Cousins getting Darnell Mooney involved, showing what a weapon he can be. So that's another bright spot. Definitely a part of the reason they move up 3 spots for me. But Falcons looking good together as a whole. Obviously, Troy Anderson, who I've always been a massive fan of. He has a big game, 17 tackles, and then that pick six. Played quarterback and running back, and played both ways in college at Montana. So great game for Troy Anderson. Great game for Darnell Mooney as well. So Falcons look better, beat a good team in the Saints, but they don't really look like this like surefire playoff contender yet. And I think that could come late in the season, especially if Kirk Cousins is able to keep getting things rolling like he did this game towards the end at the very least. Pittsburgh Steelers, 14. They move back 3 spots for me. They get a loss to the Colts. Again, this is one they very easily could have won. Colts go up early, big. They go up very big early and make it difficult for them to come back. But they don't move back super far, mainly because Justin Fields did what I think everybody was kind of asking. He had won games this year really because of the defense. It wasn't necessarily because of him. Obviously, he's a quarterback in the offense, so he has some effect on it, but they weren't really putting up points. They finally put up points in this game. Defense lets them down early. And honestly, the refs let them down with all the missed holding calls on TJ Watt. TJ Watt was a big problem in this game, but the stat line doesn't show it, and the score doesn't show it because he was held on seemingly like all the plays. not all the plays, but like you can find a lot of clips where he was blatantly held, and it was very bad, and it results in a loss for the Steelers here. So they just moved back a little bit. Again, it's just because I'm not super high on them, and ironically, when the offense finally starts to put it together, then the defense slips up and kind of screws them over. So they're going to have to put it together on both sides and both play better for me to move them up significantly higher still. In the playoff realm at 14, they'd be the 7th seed in the AFC. Next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles at 5, moving back 5. Big move back for me. They just had a really bad loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I believe I had ranked 12th last week, and they end up moving up, obviously, a decent amount, but 33-16, bad score, bad defense, bad defensive choices. We have Nolan Smith, their edge rusher, lining up against some wide receivers in coverage. CJ is getting burned left and right. Darius Slay gets burned a couple times too. So the defensive back room not looking great. Jalen Carter, really only the big upside on the defensive line. Bryce Huff has not been a replacement for Hassan Reddick, although Philadelphia Eagles fans might be happy that Hassan Reddick's gone, and I would be too, especially with his whole contract situation thing that's going on. But the defense has needs to play better, and played better when the Eagles had success. So I think they're going to need that moving forward. I also think that Jalen Hurts is really missing his buddy Jason Kelce, who was really, I think, the reason that the tush push had all this success. And I think that the offensive line was regarded as one of the top ones in the league. Jalen Hurts gets pressured a lot. Obviously missing A.J. Brown, so it results in a few coverage sacks too. But the Buccaneers were getting after the quarterback in this one, and I think Hurts got sacked like 6 times or 7 times maybe. So it was a bad game for Hurts, and who honestly hasn't looked great this year. I've always thought that he was a little bit overrated, but I still think the Eagles are in a good spot. So despite the negativity about him this week, mainly because he lost by 17 to the Buccaneers. So they move back 5 spots. Again, not a bad team, and I definitely think this is a team that will in the end be in the top 10, but they're just gonna have to play like it. So this week was not one that they did that, and they sit right behind the Commanders in their division, who now lead their division for me. And they're 3-1. So obviously, when you're 3-1, you're leading the division when the other teams are all 2-2 and 1-3. So I think the Commanders on offense have looked completely unstoppable, and it seems like it could go anywhere. Jaden Daniels doesn't need to target a specific receiver. He's just kind of playing on time, a lot of short underneath routes, nothing crazy, nothing fancy, nothing exciting, but I think that's exactly what Cliff Kingsbury needs to do in order to get this offense to operate. Also have Brian Robinson Jr. doing a lot of help there. I think having a good running game and a nice, stout, consistent run game is so important for a rookie quarterback. I think one of the reasons that Caleb Williams has struggled, and I think one of the reasons Bo Nix has struggled a little bit with, Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin not really having any great games so far. Same thing with the Bears backfield. Obviously, DeAndre Swift finally has a great game, and it results in a win. So I think if they can keep running the ball well, the defense can, stats there don't say it, and it's honestly because the Commanders have scored pretty quick, a decent amount of times too, and it just seems like they're going to score every time. So defense doesn't, I hope they're not like playing down to their opponent, because again, they get a massive win here, but I think the defense is actually better than the stat line shows, but I think it's just partially because the Commanders have been putting up a shit ton of points every week. So they move up 4 spots for me. Another great week for them. And every week they've just gotten better and better on offense and defense. So starting to look like a scary team moving forward, which is impressive. Jaden Daniels doing his little CJ Stroud run thing. Only 4 games in, so don't overreact to it. But Commanders move up 4 spots to me to 12, right behind the Saints, who big mover, actually the biggest mover backwards. Really just, they got smoked. It wasn't even really that close. It wasn't a good game. It was obviously a close score, but so I guess my comment there is pretty bad, and it wasn't even close. But I think, you look at the previous week and then you look at this week, I still don't think the Falcons are clicking on all cylinders. And I will say, I think this looked like a game that the Saints win, but with how much better a lot of the teams ahead of them looked, and with having some powerhouses needing to enter the top 10 for me, unfortunately that resulted in the Saints moving back. And in these videos, I like to project the team where they are now, in the now, with, definitely factoring in some recency bias, but also seeing how they'll look moving into the future. And I think, to me, the Saints are looking like one of the teams that, after the first 2 weeks specifically, definitely look like they could be in the playoffs. But when you start to lose games like this, you lose barely to the Eagles, who have definitely not looked as good as they are last year. Not saying they're a bad team, but just haven't looked as good. And then you lose again to the Falcons, who I think are an even worse team. I think you start to run into some problems, and they're starting to look more like last year's team. So I kind of overreacted a little bit, with definitely some opportunity to look up if they look like that week 1 and week 2 Saints team. But they move back to 11 for me, 8 spots. Big mover, but again, not kind of living up to the hype of the first 2 weeks. So they move again. I was talking about some powerhouses they had to move behind. Ravens, to me, had to move into the top 10. The Bills I had as the number 1 ranked team last week, and they absolutely crushed them. What was it, 35-10? Wasn't even close. Ravens finally starting to put it together after having a week this year where they lose to the Raiders, who I think suck. So I think the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry combo is going to be insane, with Patrick Ricard too. It's very scary in that offense. So Lamar in this game doesn't even really have to do anything, and they put up 35 points. And it's basically just the defense playing well, and Derrick Henry running the ball, and that's all it took to take down, again, who I had last week, number 1, the Buffalo Bills. So again, they're going to need to do it on a consistent basis to move back into the top 5, especially with those few bad weeks they had. But the Baltimore Ravens are finally starting to put it together, and they move up pretty big here with 4 spots from 14 to 10, right behind the San Francisco 49ers. So only move up a spot. Again, get a win, but it's over the Patriots, who I think are one of the worst teams in the league. And I think the 49ers should have looked better on offense. Obviously, again, Jordan Mason, talked about him a little bit earlier, had a good game. But I think throwing the ball, Brock Purdy, to me, I don't know, he just didn't have a phenomenal week. And I thought they should have done better against the Patriots. So 49ers, still a great team. They move up 1 spot, but they're 2-2. It's another team that has some bad losses, but I think could be one of the most complete teams. And this week, obviously, the defense shows out too. I think they got like 7 sacks or something too. So a big week for the 49ers, but with those couple bad weeks in there, so far that's all we have to go off of. So I think definitely deserving to move up, but not deserving enough to make a large jump over a team like the Houston Texans, who they do move back 2 spots in a win, but it's a win against the Jaguars, who again I have ranked as the worst team in the league, and the Texans, it took like a game-winning, like a close end of the game drive to end up getting this win. Minus 15 on the year on the point differential after a bad loss last week. So they're 3-1. They're still, I think they're a good football team. I was a little bit worried about CJ Stroud getting figured out, having like a sophomore slump sort of situation, but I don't think he's actually been having that. I think Stroud's actually been playing pretty well. I think they're dealing with Joe Mixon being out. Cam Akers just isn't Joe Mixon. And but yeah, I just think the Jaguars did a little bit too well for me to not have the Texans move back, especially with some of these teams that move up, like the Seattle Seahawks, who do move up too. Again, in a loss, seems weird for the Texans to move back in a win. Seahawks move up in a loss, but they played a really good game against the Lions. Just had a few times where they weren't able to get it into the end zone. And yes, I do think that I think you have to win against these good teams, but Jared Goff has a perfect game, essentially. 2 passing touchdowns, a receiving touchdown, 18 for 18, almost 300 yards. So phenomenal game for Jared Goff. And I think with that being said, I think the Seahawks played really well on offense. They just weren't able to stop Jared Goff, but the final score doesn't really show it as much as it should. But the Seahawks were in this game for most of the time and really looked like a team that could win against the Lions. And that's why they move up a little bit for me, because I just thought that was the way that they played was impressive. It was just the Lions had a once in a lifetime game. And then you'll see where they move up in this week. But I think if the Seahawks beat the Lions and Jared Goff has just a slightly worse stat line, what if he throws a few incompletions? Obviously those results, the drives wouldn't result in a touchdown likely, or less points at the very least. Seahawks get a win. They're 4-0. We're talking about them at number 1. So I think the way they were able to stay in the game warrants them moving ahead of the Texans, and that's why they end up at 7, right behind the Green Bay Packers. Jerry, what are you doing, dude? You got teams that are moving up, that are losing games. Well, Green Bay Packers just lost by 2 points to the Minnesota Vikings and pulled off a pretty immaculate comeback against a Vikings defense that's been top tier this year, not necessarily because of stars on the defense, but because of a Brian Flores defense that's just difficult to handle. And the Packers being able to come back with such a, being down 28-0 so early in the game, I think shows a lot for the Packers, and is why they move up for me. As you'll see, there's another team that moved up a little bit here, and it was the team the Packers played, but it's not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I have at number 5, moving up 7 spots. We talked about them kind of stomping all over the Eagles, making them look silly, and basically the only game you have anything negative to say about the Buccaneers is that Broncos game. And yeah, they looked like dog shit against the Broncos, but I think teams are going to have those games. That's why a team like, you can't overreact too much to the Buffalo Bills. Like I said, they looked like one of the best teams in the game, and then they get stomped by the Ravens. You're going to have some games like that, and I think this is one of those for the Buccaneers. So that's why I move them up so much. I've kind of had them in this like 5 to 10 range so far this year, except for last year. I obviously had them last week I had them at 10 or at 12. So I think Buccaneers with a big win over the Eagles, who they're not really putting it together. I think I could be overrating the Buccaneers a little bit here. They definitely could be closer to that 10 range by the Ravens and the 49ers, especially with those teams both being 2-2. Maybe you put them just behind the Texans or something. But again, I thought the Buccaneers big win, 17-point win over the Eagles was a lot more impressive than like the 4-point win over the Jaguars. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers up 7 spots to 5 at 3-1. Buffalo Bills, just talked about them, shouldn't overreact too much, bring them down too much, because they played against the Ravens, who typically are a good team. They add Derrick Henry, and they seemingly should be a really good team. They're just 2-2 to start the year and have a loss to the Raiders. So I think the Buffalo Bills, it's an off game. Obviously they can move back, but it's going to be tough. I think with how the Bills have been playing this year, going to be tough for me to see them outside of the top 10 unless they start playing like it. But they move back to 3 from number 1 last week at 3-1 to number 4, right behind the Detroit Lions, who again, Jared Goff, 18 for 18, 290 yards, 2 passing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown on a Detroit special pass from Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just a beautiful game. Pretty much all around. I guess their defense could have done better. But when their offense is scoring like that, David Montgomery's cooking, Jahmyr Gibbs is cooking, Jared Goff is perfect. It was a phenomenal week for the Lions against, again, a good team, an undefeated team in the Seattle Seahawks. So that's why they move up to 3, not quite to 2 where the Kansas City Chiefs are. These last 2, it's really just they're 4-0. I think you could definitely make an argument for the Lions being ahead of the Chiefs, especially after these games last week. The Chiefs kind of get a sorry victory against the Chargers, and the Lions get a big win against an undefeated team. I think you could definitely make that argument. But Chiefs are 4-0, so it's tough for me to keep them at the top. And seemingly will be a team at the top as long as those 2 guys over there are on the screen. So, Kansas City Chiefs move up 2 spots. I think their defense kind of being the shining star this year. Obviously, Mahomes injures Rashee Rice's, his star receiver injures his knee or whatever it is going to end up being. But yeah, Chiefs get the W and move up 2 spots. They had them at 4 last week. I thought they were deserving of moving ahead of the Bills for sure after their performance. Maybe not the Lions. Again, could argue for 3, but I got them at 2 right behind the Minnesota Vikings, who, good Lord, just on defense, offense, name a flaw. It's just Aaron Jones in the run game's great. Justin Jefferson's been great. Jordan Addison making plays when he needs to. I mean, Sam Darnold's looked like he's in the MVP race, which is unbelievable to me. But Brian Flores really figuring out that defense. Name like a star player on the team. Probably going to be tough to. I really like Josh Metellus, which is a hilarious name to name. He's a guy that just plays every position on the defense. I really like, Harrison Smith, but he's getting kind of old. So who are these star players, you ask? Well, Danielle Hunter, he hasn't actually had like an amazing, he hasn't had I just said Danielle Hunter. Jonathan Grenard is now on the edge. He's the one they acquire. Hasn't looked great. Didn't mean Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter's on the Texans. Danielle Hunter also hasn't looked that great this season, but Jonathan Grenard, their acquisition on the D-line hasn't really looked great. Their DB room's been a problem, but it really hasn't been a problem because their defense as a whole has been able to force turnovers and play well enough because their offense has just been in their bag doing everything they need to do. So let's go over the whole thing. Again, I think the biggest one that I could be off on, I think you could make a very easy argument for the Lions ahead of the Chiefs here. Again, Chiefs 4-0, Lions 3-1, kind of where I have them there. That's kind of why that comes down. Chiefs haven't lost a game. The Lions have. Sorry about it. I think the Eagles definitely could move up, and I think the Saints probably could be moved up. Moving them back 8 might be a little harsh, but again, they're starting to look like that team that they were last year. And I mean, if you look at it, I don't like the Eagles. I say that they could move up, but with how they played the last, even 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, it just hasn't been the same Eagles. So they get their big win over the Packers in Brazil week 1, and the Packers, obviously, me having them high up as a good team, but then they kind of went down from there, in my opinion. So that's why they keep moving down the list, but it just seems like the Eagles are supposed to be a good team. They're just having a tough time. Another team, I think the Ravens and the 49ers by the end of the year could be a top team in the NFL. They're just having some struggles early on, but let me know what you think down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.